Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If we could all stand for a moment of silence for the pledge.
Present.
Village Manager Benton.
Here.
Councilwoman Birch. Present. Councilman Meltz.
Here.
Councilman Zalkowitz will be with us shortly. Vice Mayor Brady. Here. Mayor Glenn.
Present.
You have quorum.
Great, thank you very much. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I am sick as a dog and going to try not to get anybody else sick, but I didn't want to miss it. I'm in the home stretch. I don't want to be a lame duck. So, thank you. I sound like a duck. But I do want to start tonight with something, that we approach with very mixed feelings because obviously we think so much of her and have had such a long relationship with her and think so much of her. But I do want to start tonight with a proclamation honoring Sister Linda Bevilacqua, the president of Barre, who is retiring and has been a friend of this village, and we are certainly grateful for the partnership that we have with Barre. And the continuing strengthening of ties between the village and Barre as we've explored over the last several months. And I would like to take a few minutes here, if possible, to read this proclamation into the record before we continue with the presentation. So, Miami Shores Village Proclamation from the Office of the Mayor, Miami Shores Village, Florida. Whereas Sister Linda Bevilacqua has given 50 years of unwavering administrative service to Barre University, becoming Barre's 6th and first alumna president in 2004, and whereas Sister Linda has provided exceptional leadership to the university, raising it to unprecedented levels of accomplishment in all of its missions, student living, leadership, social justice, and touching the lives of countless people served by the institution, and whereas under the leadership of Sister Linda, the university has achieved significant milestones, including Barre's transformation into a comprehensive, multicultural, multi-ethnic university with around 8,000 students, and Barre's Law School in Orlando receiving full accreditation from the American Bar Association with a little over 700 students. And whereas during Sister Linda's 14-year tenure as president, in spite of challenges such as economic volatility, changing demographics, and non-traditional competitors, Barre has experienced program growth, diversification, institutional reorganization, and new and hybrid learning modalities. And whereas many innovations championed by Sister Linda and her staff, including the creation and development of the Paul and Margaret Brand Research Center, the Center for Community Service Initiatives, the Center for Earth Jurisprudence, the Center for Human Rights and Social Justice, 5 outreach clinics at the law school, and a Center for Academic Student Achievement, along with many other contributions. And whereas Sister Linda Bevilacqua was named 2016 Citizen of the Year by the Greater Miami Shores Chamber of Commerce, recognizing her involvement in the Miami Shores community, including her years as president of Barre University and her commitment to furthering educational opportunities for all. And whereas Sister Linda has been a worthy steward of public trust in steering the university on a positive course for 14 years and leaving it well prepared for the future. And whereas Sister Linda has announced her retirement from the university effective June 30th, 2019. Now, therefore, let it be resolved on behalf of the Village Council, I, Mayor McAdam Glenn, do hereby extend the village's utmost appreciation to Sister Linda Bevilacqua for her leadership and outstanding service to Barre University, and extend its sincere and heartfelt best wishes upon the occasion of her retirement. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this recognition, and I'm delighted that many members of our university community who actually live in the village, besides me, are here with us tonight. I was thinking today that I have actually lived in the village not consecutively, but for 32 years. I was here as a student in the late 50s and 60s, used to go to the Five and Dime, and I loved Howard Johnson's. And then I was here in the 70s, I was here in the early 80s, and now 15 years at Barry. I'm so happy to tell you that our new president, Dr. Mike Allen, is going to live in the village as well. We think it's so important that the relationship with the village and the university be symbolized by our president living here. And he was very open to that, as was his wife, Beth, who is an actuary. And they have 2 children, James and Maya. So we are looking for housing for them, but I think they will be very engaged with the village. We hope that the village of Miami Shores is very proud of us. We always say we live in the village beautiful. I know that was what we always called Miami Shores. And one of our founders, we have 4 historic founders. One of them is one of your predecessors, Mac, and that was Mr. Jack Thompson. John Thompson, as he was known, if you know Smathers and Thompson, I should say Thompson, the law firm, that was our Jack Thompson. And he was a very good friend of Monsignor Patrick Barry, who was the founding pastor of St. Patrick's on the Beach. And when my congregation of sisters was looking for land, actually Bishop Barry, who was in St. Augustine, and our Mother Superior, who was in Adrian, Michigan, asked their brother, Monsignor William Barry, to talk with someone from the village. And he knew Jack Thompson, and the rest is history. You won't believe this, but for 40 acres, we paid $24,000 for our original 40 acres. And I know the village was incorporated in 1932, and we were buying that land in 38, 39, and we opened in September 1940. So we are very happy to be in the village of Miami Shores. We thank you for your support of our programs. We know that you are always welcome to come to any of our athletic events, and next weekend there's going to be a wild and crazy production. Little Shop of Horrors. What's wrong with me? Little Shop of Horrors. But we're very excited about that, and I will be around. I'm very blessed that the Board of Trustees has named me President Emerita, but I will take some sabbatical leave time, and then I will be back working at the university part-time. We have created an Adrian Dominican Institute for Mission and Leadership, and I will be the founding director. So I'll be around. One of my bucket list items is to volunteer in the library. So I may do that. I started my educational career as a first grade teacher, and so I might like to come and read to the children. I know we have a phenomenal library at the university, but I tend to go to our library here in Miami Shores. And I love to just sit there and be a resident and really delight in how many people use that library. So thank you, everybody, for supporting our university, for welcoming our students and our faculty. And here tonight, our residents. Our Dean of the School of Business, Dr. Joan Phillips, lives in the village. Roxanne Davies, Associate Vice President for Student Services, wife of John Davies, lives in the village. Our Provost, Dr. John Murray, and his wife Rebecca live in the village. Dr. Scott Smith, our Vice President for Student Services, and his wife Patrice and their 3 children live in the village. Did I miss anybody else from the village?
Carter Wing.
Oh, Carter! Carter, you're hiding back there.
I lost some weight. You may not have recognized me.
I'm glad you're back. Good to see you. So, thank you again so much for this. I accept it in the name of our university community, and I thank you again for your support of Barry University.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, we will take leave so you can go about your business.
No problem at all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, plenty of good seats available. Come on up.
That's right. Use us.
Okay. Okay. I think next we have a presentation on Miami-Dade County Public Schools state legislative priorities.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Eva Regueira, and I'm from the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs and Grants Administration at Miami-Dade County Public Schools. I bring greetings on behalf of our school board, our superintendent, and my direct supervisor, Araida Mendez-Cartaya, Associate Superintendent over Intergovernmental Affairs, Grants Administration, and Community Engagement, who could not be here this evening because she is actually up in Tallahassee, where I'll be with her tomorrow, because the legislative session is in session. So I'll just take a few minutes of your time. I know that you received a letter from our school district to your mayor, and I think that you have it in your packets, and attached you have all of the priorities or all of the items on the program for the state platform this year. I just wanted to speak to you briefly concerning a few super priorities that we have, and we hope that after this explanation we would earn your favorable support of our legislative platform, because it is very important to us and we are working very hard on it in Tallahassee. So first and foremost, we would like to increase the base student allocation within the framework of the FEFP, or the Florida Education Finance Program, and this is the formula that is utilized to divvy up the money in the state for education. The biggest chunk of that FEFP is the base student allocation, and it's the only part of the funding formula which allows for teacher raises. Okay, and so we always ask that there be an increase in the base student allocation because it's the most flexible part of the FEFP. It's also the part by which the district cost differential is multiplied. Okay, and that is a huge issue for us here locally. I'm sure that you may have already heard about it out in the community. The Greater Chamber, it supports our legislative priority on the district cost differential. The Day delegation has made it a priority this session to do that fix on the district cost differential. Essentially, the district cost differential is a coefficient or a number that is put before each of the 67 districts that rates the 67 districts in terms of, well, it's supposed to be rating in terms of how expensive it is to conduct business or to live within that particular district, and thereby creating equity in terms of how the monies are spread throughout the 67 districts in Florida. The trouble is that in the last 15 years or so that this formula has been utilized, there has been a lack of transparency and also accuracy with which the formula was applied. The formula was sort of figured out at one of our state universities. We're not really quite sure how the input was given, who was giving input, how it was being done, and it wasn't until last year we were able to get the Florida legislature to allocate $100,000 towards a study of the district cost differential that the FDOE then in turn hired a group by the name of the Balmoral Group out of Central Florida to actually study the district cost differential, and exactly what we had feared for so many years was exactly what they confirmed, that there was a lack of transparency, there had been a lack of accuracy, and that they also recommended, their final recommendation was to create sort of a board that would review this every single year to make sure that every single district was receiving their fair share. Unfortunately, the district, which is the largest donor district in the state of Florida, is Miami-Dade, and we were receiving the short end of the stick for many years. So this has been a Dade delegation priority. We are happy to report that it is now part of House Bill 1031, Senate Bill 1284, and just this weekend it was added to PKA1, which is an appropriations, it's a pre-K through 12 appropriations committee bill. So it does look very favorable in terms of passage this year, but that has been a priority in order for us to return back our fair amount of funding down to Miami-Dade, okay? In addition to that, we'd also like to make sure that the funding compression allocation, the new funding compression allocation, be eliminated from the FEFP this year because we believe that the new funding compression allocation was put into the FEFP last year in order to counter any work that we were doing to try and fix the DCD. So if we were to, fix the DCD and make it fair once again for the 67 districts in Florida, we would sort of be countering any work on that with the new funding compression allocation. So we've made it very clear to our Dade delegation that we have to fix the DCD and get rid of the new funding compression allocation because it's not needed. One already exists, and there's no need to continue pumping funding into the districts that, there's really no rhyme or reason to do so. In addition to that, we would like to fully fund the cost of having police officers in our schools. We know that that has been a huge issue, not just in Miami-Dade, but in all districts across the entire state. We have been very fortunate where many municipalities and the county actually have stepped up to share this cost with us because unfortunately it was an unfunded mandate last year. Based on our calculations, we needed about $400 million statewide in order to fund an officer per school, and we received about half of that. Okay, so statewide, this has been a collaboration between everybody involved, municipalities, counties, and school districts. And also, all of our safety and security priorities, safety and security is of utmost importance to us, and if tomorrow, if you tune into the legislature, Senate Bill 7030 will be discussed on safety and security. The last thing that I would like to mention is level the playing field with charter schools. This year, we are very proud to say that Miami-Dade County Public Schools has earned an A for the first time since we have calculated grades in the state of Florida for districts. And we are extremely proud of that for many reasons, okay? One of which is that we have probably the most difficult population in the state to teach. We have the highest percentage of ELL, or English language learners. We have the highest percentage of special education students in the state of Florida in our district. And so it becomes very difficult to teach this population with diminishing funds that we've had for many, many years. And for Miami-Dade County Public Schools to get that A finally, to crack that nut, to get to that level is a huge accomplishment for us. And we would like to have the same flexibility that charter schools have within the FEFP in order to be able to spend the funds. We have gotten numerous awards year after year for the efficacy of our budgeting process, for how well we have been using our funds. And so we would like to have that flexibility within the FEFP. Just so you know, in the state of Florida, charter schools receive the funding equivalent for the FEFP in one lump sum, and they use that money as they see fit. Traditional public schools do not receive that money in one lump sum. We get that one lump sum divided by the base student allocation, and then there's a bunch of categoricals or boxes that come with instructions for each one of those funds, okay? So all we're asking is for the same flexibility for certain districts that would be considered high performing, okay? And we're trying to reestablish the definition of high performing because in Miami-Dade, it is very difficult to get 2 A's in the last 3 years, which is the current definition in statute. So we're trying to get a little bit of flexibility in that so that we can continue getting the incredible gains and the incredible achievements that we have in Miami-Dade. We are the #1 magnet district in the entire country. Our graduation rate, when you extrapolate, actually the charter schools were at an 89% graduation rate, which is an incredible increase over the last 10-15 years in Miami-Dade. So with all of that, I've heard you have a packed agenda. So unless there are any questions, I just ask for your favorable support of this item and support our legislative priorities up in the state legislature.
Great, thank you. Council, do you have any questions?
Thank
No.
you very much.
Thank you very much for coming. Next, I think we have the Country Club Advisory Board's annual report.
Good evening. How you guys doing? How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good? Good. Well, we're going to give a little report of 2018, 2019 of the Country Club. I'm sure you guys are been waiting a long time for that. We just want to list the members. You have Bruce. What's that? Oh, I apologize. Mark Gallo. I thought you. Mark Gallo, 93. You need the address too there.
Yeah.
933 Northeast 99th Street.
Pedro Rajo, 1700 Northeast 105th Street.
Yeah, I apologize. So, we want to give you a list of the members. We have Bruce Brown, Mary Griffith, myself, Thomas Holloran, Marty Manis, Rocco Miranda, and Pedro Rajo. Those are our members. And along with all of us playing a lot of golf, we do during the meetings, we have a once a month meeting, last Wednesday of the month. And we get feedback from the members. We bring it back to the club management. We discuss what upgrades or things that they need to be done. And that's kind of how it's been working for a while. It's going pretty good. We have a lot of upgrades. Pedro's going to mention some of the stuff in the sporting side, and I'm going to get back and talk a little bit about the house. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Good evening, council, residents.
Good evening.
I'm going to go into the summary of accomplishments that we've done on the golf side. So like Mark states, we have a collaborative process with the club manager, Alberto, as well as Chris, who's the director of golf, and we gather feedback from members in regards to like course conditions and things they would like to see improve. And this year, I would have to say, was the year where there was most improvements at the club by far. I'll just go through a couple of them quickly. One of the big changes that the club saw was that they changed the structure of how tee times are made now. So prior, if you were a full member or an executive member, you would be allowed 7-day advanced tee times. Now, if you're converted to a full member, you get 10 days advanced tee times. So they saw a large conversion rate of executive members that became full members, the highest they've ever had. It's been a huge success. So everything's falling in place now in terms of tee times because it was always an issue, particularly before daylight savings times. Some of the course upgrades, the major ones, we'll start off with the driving range. Alberto went ahead with, we had discussed it previously, but he went ahead and installed I forgot what it's called, I think it's called a DuraTurf mat on the back range. So prior, if you've been to the club, they had individual hitting bays which were kind of like, not that good, and they were old and raggedy. So now they dug up the back and they installed a big strip of turf. It's the same turf that they'd use at Doral. And so now we have a dedicated, when they're laying the range rest or doing maintenance on the driving range, they have a dedicated area in the back for the mats. It was a pretty big, substantial capital improvement for the club. They also, along with that, they added a couple of Adirondack chairs. Doesn't look like much, but it is really like a country club, more of a private country club feel now, because that's what you see at a lot of private clubs. In terms of on the course, they replaced all the ball washers. I believe it was every other hole. They added benches on the golf course. There's a large group of members who walk on Saturday, as well as the Barry University golf team is there. So they've added benches for the backup. That's been well received by the walkers. In terms of the pro shop, they added a new carpet in the pro shop. They upgraded the carpet. They updated their payment processing system. And then also, which has paid really big dividends, obviously, I'm sure you've heard the issue with the overflow of the canal on 2. It would be a major problem for the golf staff there. They'd have to reroute the players. And I don't know the specifics of it, but they've somehow installed a valve system and repaved the curb. So now it's helped control the flow, even when they had the red tide?
The king, or what do you call it? King tide.
King tide. Now, in terms of the golf tournaments, we've worked hard with other members in expanding the Men's Golf Association. This year, we've added to the formal club calendar a tournament that we're going to play Every year it's basically a 2-day Ryder Cup tournament that'll be played in the first weekend of December. Every year it was a huge success. We had 20 participants. We raised the price. That was always a concern, like how much do you charge or what kind of value we could give, but it was very well received. We just completed our member guest. The prior member guest was a 1-day tournament. It was played on Sunday. So you played Sunday during the day and then you had a brunch. Well, this year what we added was we had a Friday night dinner for the members and their guests. And then on Saturday we had a flighted competition, and those that were lucky enough to win the flights went out and then played another competition to decide the overall winner. Again, with the basis of just trying to grow the camaraderie and having guys pile into the cart and go out. The Women's Golf Association is what the Men's Golf Association strives to be. They have a large membership. They have a tremendous tournament schedule, and they're still going strong. And then lastly, on the golf side, we have a new Men's Golf Association president. I was the first president. We succeeded it with Ian McNamara. Ian, I don't know if anyone knows Ian, but he works at Miami Country Day, and he's a person of his word, and he really knows about golf a lot. So it's a good succession we have. Now we'll go into the tennis briefly. Tennis had some major upgrades this year. They resurfaced the court surfaces and also bought a new piece of equipment that actually cleans the surfaces more effectively. And what they're really excited about, the pro Howie, is the implementation of pickleball. So I saw the email today, they're launching a pickleball event. Pickleball is a combination of tennis, badminton, and table tennis where you play with wooden paddles. I don't know much about it, but I'm probably going to go to check it out. So he is very excited about that. That's a major upgrade.
Open house on the 23rd.
Yeah, they're going to have an open house on the 23rd. So that's a game for all ages. That's all I have right now for golf and tennis.
And then real quickly, just regarding the house, the clubhouse, the country club itself, they've made some nice improvements around the valet area. I think you've noticed it. And then inside, they changed all the furniture down the hall and in the sitting area right there. So it looks really nice. They've done really good job with that. So we continue to collaborate with them, try to get them to do upgrades as much as we would love them to do. But they do what they can and what they do, and they do keep up this course nice. And we'll continue to do that. And I think with recommendations would be, if you ever want to come by the club, come to an advisory board, see what we do, or come for a beer or play some golf.
It is truly a collaborative process with Alberto and Chris. So we've come a long way.
Yes, we have.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Any
Thanks for your
questions?
time. Any questions? Yep. Councilman?
Yes.
Mark Pedro, I want to thank you guys very much. You guys was very thorough, very well done. A lot of times boards come in here and they just don't really give us much. I appreciate all the work you and your committee and your board has done all year, and especially you guys preparing, taking this seriously, and coming in and informing not just us, but the residents of what goes on over there. Thank you again.
We care very much. We know how lucky we are to
Yeah.
have the club there.
It's a beautiful place.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Good evening. Thank you for your service.
Okay. Moving on, we're going to open it up to public comment now. Anyone from the public that cares to speak, please give us your name and address when you come up to the mic, and 3 minutes apiece, whatever you'd like to share with us. It's helpful if it's on topic, but if not, you can share it anyway.
Good evening. I'm Mary Benton, 10108 Northeast First Avenue. I'm pleased, I'm thankful that the village staff has come up with the language for a resolution. I'm grateful that you all voted unanimously to direct them to do that. I'm also grateful that all 7 candidates who are running for council are in support of a Organics First integrated pest management policy. And I look forward to your unanimous vote when you agree on the final language for it. I would also, this is just an amazingly packed schedule here, or agenda. I love our theater center, and I think it deserves some pizzazz. And I think it will bring in more customers, theater goers. I think this is the kind of thing we need to go for now, and I really support that movement. I'm thrilled at the idea that we're going to be talking about installing solar on roofs in the village. This is exceedingly important given climate change and sea level rise. And I also like the idea of the full-time social media and communications coordinator if the funding can be found for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Doug Barnes, same address, 10108 Northeast First Avenue. I too want to chime in on what is a packed and I think very positive agenda, or a number of items that are positive on the agenda. The integrated pest management, several of you have seen our comments. I think it's an excellent first step. I think the language can be tightened up and made a little more a directive and a little less of a hortatory. It would be nice to do this, it'd be nice to do that. Likewise, I think let's light up downtown with an active marquee in the Miami Theater Center, bring some life down there. Solar energy, if we can move forward on any of the village buildings and do that, I welcome the discussion and I hope we can move forward on it. And I definitely feel the need for a full-time social media and communications person on the village staff. That was my question for those of you who were at the candidate forum last night, asking about, do you see a need for an improvement in village communication? I certainly do. I think it can be better. I think there's a lot of potential here, a lot more potential that we have not tapped. Finally, because I'm rushing to get through this, I like having the comments up front so people can come, make their comments, and leave if they need to, go home and take care of things at home. But it is valuable to be able to comment on specific items as they come up for discussion and as we hear the council bat them around. So I'd love to see that part, both combination, a hybrid, if you will. Comments before and comments for those who wish to stick around and stick it out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dr. George Semia, resident at 448 Northeast 96th Street. I've been a Shores resident for over 9 years, and I'm also very happy about many of the environmental friendly resolutions that's actually on the agenda. But I'm in support also of allowing the use of synthetic turf in the rear yard. I do think that this is also an environmentally friendly resolution. Save on water usage, gas, pesticide, fertilizer usage. And I think it allows the residents choice in the way that they want to actually beautify the shores.
Great, thank you.
Hello, I'm Laura Hill. I live in 13075 Griffin Boulevard in the city of North Miami. And I wanted to thank you for several of you for meeting with us regarding the integrated pest management system. I'm so excited to see this idea spreading to our neighboring villages and municipalities. You know, we all live not on an island of ourselves, but as an integrated society and community as well. And so as we use each other's parks and facilities, I'm so happy to know that Miami Shores, along with North Miami, will be leading the way to creating healthy environments for our children to play in, our animals, and for all of us. So I congratulate you on making this decision in advance. And I just want to thank you very much for listening to all of the things and taking into account all of the information that we brought to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good evening, council members. Giselle Kovac, 290 Northeast 98th Street. First, I'd like to comment on prioritizing the green initiatives that appear on the agenda this evening, eliminating the pesticide use on village property. As somebody who's LEED certified, I support the village being a shining example and a leader in green initiatives, and I think solar panels is a great way to go about that. I also would like to advocate for synthetic turf. I believe it's already being used in one of the village's tot lots next to the rec center. Finally, I'd like to thank Mayor Glenn for sponsoring a review of the parking requirements and the FAR 1 designation for the downtown area. I'd like to address specifically the recommendation to review the signage code. And while the entire signage code for the B1 district needs review and revision, I'm particularly interested in the signage code for Miami Theater Center, as I'm the executive director there. I'm hoping that we can amend those signage codes so they are theater specific and we are not being held to the same standards as the businesses are. We are hopeful that we can get a proper marquee installed. A marquee can inform our residents of the theater's performances and events, and it would make the building a standout landmark in accordance with the 2016 Downtown Architectural Design Manual recommendations. Not only will it bring vibrancy to the downtown, but it can also be used in times of emergency as a source of information. And last night at the forum, that was something that I heard was a concern, that there was a struggle to inform our community when, I believe it was during Hurricane Irma, about what to do. I think this would be a great use of a marquee on our theater. MTC is dedicated to the children and families of this community, and we want everybody to be able to experience the brilliant, culturally rich programming that we're bringing to our community, and we struggle to get the information out. It would really be helpful to have a marquee, and I hope the council will agree with this recommendation of the design manual study and allow MTC to design a beautiful marquee to the highest aesthetic standards that we can achieve. Thank you all so much for your service.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Al Crespo, 689 Northeast 92nd Street. While I appreciate the value of volunteers serving on various boards and committees, I think it'd be appropriate if these committees, when they do an annual report, also have a written report that's provided to have an archival record. You know, just because you get up here and say things, you tend to lose it. I mean, if somebody wants to go back and look at stuff, they'd have to go tracing through videotapes to find anything. And a videotape is not really an official record of what it is that they did. Secondly, when it comes to the golf course and the country club have a lease that requires payments above a certain base rent. And I'm just wondering, when you hear these kinds of changes and additions and improvements or whatever, what that actually means. Because I think the bottom line issue for the residents is, how much money are we getting from the golf course? How much money are we getting from other properties that we own that are supposedly generating revenue for the village? And you know, it'd be good to have some indication of whether or not all of these changes and all these improvements are part of the responsibility of the leaser, or whether it's something that the residents end up footing the bill for. So it's just those kinds of things that I think are kind of important to follow through on. That we have written records and that we have some financial accountability of what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Daria Medvedeva. I actually live in North Miami, but we are very involved, me and my husband, with Miami Shores, proud sponsors of Miami Shores Mayor's Gala, and my kids go to Miami Shores Montessori School. I'm very excited that the resolution is put on the agenda and that we will be voting, you guys will be voting to go through with it, hopefully. Just wanted to kind of like remind, as I have two little kids here, how important it is to have a safe environment for the kids, because they play everywhere and they touch everything, they inhale everything, and pesticides are so detrimental to their health. I'm not in support of the artificial turf, and I can share research with you guys that shows how much of nanoparticles, plastic nanoparticles, can be inhaled, and of gassing as well, especially now heat here in Miami. So I will be very excited to share this research with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Howell, 70 Northeast 101 Street. I've been a Miami Shores resident since, well, I went to Barry University and then since 1992. I wanted to say thank you for putting the resolution for the integrated pest management on the agenda, and hopefully everybody's going to vote for following through with that. It's extremely important to me. My yard is totally, I'm a neighbor of Mary Benton. Our yards are totally pest-free, mostly native. We see that it works. You don't need pesticides. It's extremely harmful to the environment, to our children, to us, to our pets, to everyone. And I'd like to see that as we move forward, that the public spaces in Miami Shores really work on becoming more native, pesticide-free. It can be done. Nature works. We just need to work with nature and not against nature. So thank you for your work in this, and I hope that you will look to us, the people that are really working on this and researching it and putting our heart and energy and intelligence into it, to come to us when you have questions, if you do, because I know we'd all be happy to help and share our expertise. I am also not a fan of the artificial turf. I just think that you shouldn't replace nature with artificial turf. And if we stick with natives and we stick with non-pesticides and we think out of the box, I personally think that's a better way to go. Obviously, Dasha has done a lot of the research that it is harmful. It's not as organically friendly as people would think it is. I'm not a fan of that. And as far as the marquee goes, I would love to see a big, beautiful marquee on our theater, because oftentimes I'm thinking, what's going on at the theater? And I don't really know. And sometimes I don't have the energy or the time to look into it. But if it was right there and beautiful, it'd be one of the first things you notice going down Northeast 2nd. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Hey.
Victor Bruce, 370 Northeast 101st Street. I'm in full support of the change in the signage for theater. Urban planning of towns includes different functions and different uses. A theater is unlike any other building, and it should have its own type of signage. I know the code doesn't really provide guidelines for it, but it should be treated differently. So I'm in full support of that, looking at that to change. I'm in full support of the storm mediation that you guys are going to be looking at. I just like to hear more about it, because that could be a humongous project. And I wanted to bring to your attention something you probably haven't heard yet, but I think I've spoken with the building official, and some kind of talk has been happening with the county. There's a lot, as you know, I'm an architect here, there's a lot of people improving their homes. The moment they add a bathroom, they have a problem with WASA. And I think it has something to do with infrastructure, it has something to do with size of the water lines. So there's a lot of people that approach me, we get to the point of doing the drawings, and when we get to the county, they come back and say, you don't have enough water pressure, the water line is not big enough. So something to be aware of. Something else has to happen between us and the county. I don't think it should be it's too much of a hardship on a resident to have to extend a line or kind of do work like that. So it's something I'd like for you guys to be aware of. Thank you.
Okay, great. We'll ask for an update on that. Thank you. Other comments? Anyone? Okay.
I'm sorry. Can I just say something quickly?
You can come right up. Absolutely.
Hello, Richard Santiago, 448 Northeast 96th Street. We previously made comments in regards to the artificial turf, and I think some people here make some valid points. I think that there should be a differentiation between turf in public spaces and front yards and turf in the backyard. As a homeowner, you take pride in owning your own piece of land and being able to do as you please with your backyard. That should not affect anyone else. I understand the need to have certain restrictions when it comes to structures for safety reasons and setbacks, but when it comes to turf, it should not affect your backyard, your private space.
Great. Thank you for your feedback. Okay.
Item 6A, approval of the March 5th, 2019 Village Council meeting minutes.
I'd like to move to approve the minutes.
Second. All right, I have a motion and a second. The second was Councilman Birch.
And Zelkowitz.
Oh, or Zelkowitz, either way. I think it was a tie.
Maybe because I'm on this side.
Yeah, that's right, he's closer. All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Item 7A, an ordinance of the Miami Shores Village, Florida, providing for the levy and collection of non-ad valorem assessments for maintenance, operation, construction, and repair of the village's stormwater management system, providing for the levy and collection of non-ad valorem assessments for fiscal year 2019-2020, providing for the continuation of the assessments from year to year, providing for certification of a stormwater maintenance non-ad valorem assessment using the uniform tax bill collection method, providing for amendments to Chapter 20, Article 5 of the Village Code of Ordinances, providing for severability, providing for an effective date. Staff on this item is the village manager.
Great. Mr. Manager, you want to start us off?
Mr. Mayor, if you recall, council brought up the possibility of raising our stormwater utility fee some months back so that we could start implementing some of the projects identified in our vulnerability study. Mr. Serafan correctly opined that we needed to do a rate study before we could do such a rate increase. The village went out for an RFQ. We hired Stantec Consulting Services. Ms. Kelly Westover is here, and she'll introduce her team that did the actual study, and she'll take you through the presentation tonight. We had a couple of items in the capital side of this that we identified that I'm sure she'll talk about in the financial equation. One of them identified in the vulnerability study was the implementation or installation, if you will, of a drainage system in the Shores Estates behind the Kmart area there. That was a $1 million price tag for that. The other thing that we identified was raising the height of the seawall in our Bayfront Park through a Florida Inland Navigation District, and we included our 50% match, which is $1.5 million in their equation as well as an annual $100,000 appropriation, if you will, for various drainage and or studies that may need to be done as we continue to address sea level rise and ponding and puddling throughout the village. So with that, Kelly, if you could just quickly take us through the presentation.
Great, thank you so much. Mayor Glenn, Council, pleased to be here with you this evening. Kelly Westover with Stantec. I have Kyle Stevens with me as well. We have a short presentation this evening to go over the highlights from the stormwater rate study, which you all had in your packet.
Great.
There are two main components that we focused on with the rate study. The revenue sufficiency component, looking at a 10-year projection, as well as the rate design. So the presentation today has four components. We're going to go over the revenue requirements, the update of impervious area, which is your billing unit, the hardened surfaces within each parcel, and the stormwater assessment fee that's recommended, and then the implementation steps that the village would need to take. So Kyle's going to go over the first three, and I'm going to cover the fourth, so I'll turn it over.
Perfect.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So the revenue requirement will be the first part that I'd like to go through with you, and a little bit of the background though, so that we can get started off. So your particular stormwater program is housed within an enterprise fund. Very much like water and sewer, it has its revenues and expenses set aside in a separate accounting mechanism for them. And the revenues come from an assessment that's levied on properties each year. It's currently $45 for each 2,466 square feet of impervious area that you have. And the current level of funding has not been adjusted in over 10 years. It covers mostly O&M costs currently, so operations and maintenance costs on your system. As we've started the study and integrated with staff, several things came to the surface. So the three I want to point out, and the manager has mentioned a few of them as we started off. The 105th Street drainage project is a $109 million project. And then the Bayfront Park that we've included, it's a $3 million project, but the village's match would be 1.5. So by funding 1.5, you're leveraging additional dollars on that particular project. And then additionally, we identified roughly $100,000 of miscellaneous projects that come up as you run a stormwater system. French drains are one that the community has in place in a lot of different areas that can require maintenance from time to time. And so what we did with all of that is we built a 10-year financial projection model where we could enter these assumptions into it and then look at different options for the village and come up with the most sustainable one on a go-forward basis. So what I've brought up here is the dashboard of the model we put together for Miami Shores. I just want to highlight a few of the key elements here. So the first one here in the upper left-hand corner is the operating fund. It works just like your bank account. This is the cash you have in the bank. And from a starting position, you have a little over $1 million in that particular account. And we worked with village staff to identify how much of that we would want to hold from a year-to-year basis, restricted reserve in case things happen and you need cash available to fund them, and which could be available to be used currently for projects. And so we identified roughly half of that could be used for projects that are in the CIP, so the Bayfront project and the 105th Street project. And so what we've done is come up with a plan here which would utilize some of that cash, but it also require some borrowing from the village in order to finance those projects. So the particular plan that we're presenting today has about $2.6 million in borrowing to put those projects in the ground that would be repaid over time. And in order to do that and make the capital investments that were identified, the amount of revenue that you're bringing in would need to increase. And so this plan has identified an increase of 125% from the current revenue levels. They're roughly around $247,000 as of last year, so this would be 125% above that for the next year. And then on a go-forward basis, what we're looking at is the long-term sustainability of the fund, trying to make sure that we've got enough cash in to match the cash out. And what you can see here is these two lines are on top of each other, and what we've included in here is a small annual inflation adjustment in each year to ensure that the buying power of the rate keeps up with the cost inflation that you'll see on the expenses. And so that's the revenue sufficiency part. The next element I want to walk into is impervious area. And so there are roughly 3,900 parcels within the village's stormwater management area. And impervious area is the gold standard in our industry for understanding each parcel's unique potential to generate stormwater on the system. And so what we've gone ahead and done as part of this study is created a new master file that identified for every parcel within the village the amount of impervious area on that parcel to be built. And the way we've done that is using two different data sources. So the Miami-Dade Property Appraiser is a great first start. They have a lot of great data in there that can help us understand for each parcel what are some of the basic building blocks. So building footprints and sheds and ancillary structures that we can use to begin to build this file. But in certain cases, there may be other impervious features that aren't captured. And these are typically things that don't have value necessarily from a taxing purpose, but can generate stormwater. So an example of this, this is just one property within the village, and you can see I've included a dot here for each attribute of the parcel that we were able to get from the Miami-Dade Property Appraiser. But what you can see is in the middle of that, the largest part of the parcel, the parking lot, was one that would not be included in that base data set. So what we've gone ahead and done is brought in GIS to do a spatial analysis on these parcels so that we can get a full profile of impervious area. And we've done this for any parcel that would have required this additional analysis to get a full buildup in that file. The village's impervious area in total, after we updated, is roughly 13.1 million square feet of billable area. And so that's what can be assessed with now the updated roll for each individual parcel. And we will be handing over as part of this study a master file for each parcel in the measured impervious area. So the fee calculation, where does the rubber meet the road in all of this? What we have done is put together a survey of just the local municipalities that have stormwater fees in place. And you can see I've highlighted in green here the current fee for an average residential parcel within the village, currently $45 annually. I think it's $370 or so on a monthly basis. You are on the bottom range of communities within this South Florida area. But I will say, you know, as I do this year to year, there's a lot of communities that will jump up the list as they reassess their needs and bring fees in alignment with the expenditures. So as we looked at your particular fee, what I have up here on the very top is a distribution of the impervious area for all of the residential parcels within the community. And I think there's a couple things that are telling here. First, you know, there's obviously a large amount that are centered around the average. So that's roughly 2,700 or 2,600 is the average. You can see that the majority of parcels have a similar area, but there are also parcels that can be much larger than the average or quite a bit less. And so as we looked at the current fee structure that's in place, it only differentiates for about 2,466 feet of impervious area. So what that means is if you're on the bottom side of this tail, you're not going to receive any differentiation for having a smaller parcel currently. On the larger side, though, if you go up, we move up in increments of 2466. So we are differentiating if you have some larger impervious footprints. What we have proposed for you tonight is a structure that would take a more granular approach and would look at increments of 500 square feet. So recognizing smaller footprints and then moving for each additional 500 square feet of impervious area an additional charge for that next 500 square feet. So this just gives us an ability to be more precise in understanding, now that we have measured updated impervious area, the unique fee to each parcel. The fees, as I mentioned, will need to collect more revenue than they have previously, about 125% more. Revenue will be collected through the updated billing units we put together, and all impervious area will be, the measured amount will be rounded to the nearest 500 square feet. So that accounts for errors and omissions in the GIS process to go in and measure that, and it's kind of a customer-centric adjustment that
It's rounded down.
yeah, rounded down, exactly. So, and the current structure is $45 for the 2466. The proposed structure for every 500 square foot increment would be $21.39. And so how would this look for particular properties in the community? I've put together some examples here to demonstrate how this would impact various parcels. So on the, starting on the left, I've got a smaller footprint here, a smaller home at 1,300 square feet. In the current structure, they would receive a full ERU for that 2,466 square feet. But under the new structure, they would receive 2 increments of 500 square feet. And if we look down at the bottom of this, I've put their current fee at 45. The proposed would be 42.78. So in this particular case, even though we need to generate more revenue, the rate structure adjustment to differentiate and better zero in on how much impervious for this property has resulted in an almost even or slightly lower fee than is currently being paid. If we move forward to a more average parcel in the middle there, you can see 2466, 24 is the footprint on this one. Currently $45 to 1 ERU. Under the new structure, it'd be $85.56. So it'd be an 85% increase over the current fee. And then the last one, I've included a larger footprint here. So this particular one has got about 4,900 square feet of impervious. And if we look down to the impacts of that one, they're currently at $90, but because we're now differentiating on the 500 increments, you can see that their fee would be $102 increase, or 114%. Different type of customer class, so non-single family impacts. First example up here I've got of a 21,000 square foot parcel. They would be 9 ERUs currently, but under the 500 square foot increment, we would have 42 ERUs there. The impacts to their fee would be from $405 up to $898, or 122% on that particular parcel. On the larger one I brought over here, 36,000 square feet, their current fee would be $675. Their increase would be $800, up to 131% on that particular one. As well as in the community, one unique class of customer is condominiums. So I wanted to put an example in here to demonstrate how they are built. What we do for this particular case is measure the total impervious area and then split it up between the units for billing purposes. And so in this particular case, we've got a condominium. You can see they were previously billed 11,500 square feet, but through an updated impervious area, it's actually a little bit more impervious area there, so 14,000. And you can see we're dividing that by the 14 units that are present on that parcel, come up with an average amount of square feet to bill per condominium parcel, 1,000 square feet. That particular per unit charge is $16.07 currently. It'd be $42.78. In this particular case, there's the fee increase as well as the measured impervious area, so their fee would actually go up 166% next year. I've gone ahead and updated that survey that I showed earlier to see where you'd now be on the list with the proposed rates for an average single family. And you can see in this particular case, you've moved from the bottom side to the higher of the mid-range in this case. And you know, the one important point here is, you know, this is just the level of fee. It does not calculate level of service differences. So these communities can have very big differences in the level of service they're providing, as well as when they're implementing structures. Like you haven't adjusted yours in a few years. Some of these other communities are in very similar positions where they will make large adjustments from time to time. So with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Kelly to talk about implementation.
Thank you, Kyle. So, looking forward, what the village has in front of them, today is the 19th, the first public hearing to read the ordinance. Your next public hearing where you'll consider adopting the ordinance is on April 2nd. And if that's adopted, July 17th, Holly will be sending the tax collector a billing file. 24th of August, the trim notices go out. On September 15th, the tax collector gets that final billing file. And October 1st, the new rates are effective. And then in November, the tax bill is sent out to the property owners. So that's the overall implementation steps for the village's consideration. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Council, do you have questions? Mr. Attorney, you want to start?
To be fair, I discussed this with you in advance, but I just want to make it clear for the council and the audience. Would you discuss the relationship between the fees being proposed and the benefits being generated by the program?
So the overall benefit to the community is greater than the fees being proposed. Benefit, flood protection, water quality, all the benefits that are provided by the stormwater system.
And that was a part of your analysis?
Yes, it's in the
report. It's in the report. For those who have not read it, that was part of the decision-making process. Okay.
That's a conclusion that carries substantial legal significance. I just want to get it in the record.
Great. Yes, Councilwoman, go for it. Yep.
We have a number of residences, as do a lot of other communities, that are under reconstruction. And so when you deliver this file, how do we alter it to, for particular parcels that are changing in size?
I noticed, actually, you said that it's updated periodically. What does that mean? How often do you update it?
It's a great question. So it's a living document is the best way to think about this. So we've done a comprehensive update of it and updated it with all of the latest information. But the minute we hand it over, it becomes out of date as things happen to parcels and change. So we've interfaced with staff to talk about the processes that are in place. And typically the CO process, a certificate of occupancy, as that's issued, the information is provided to village staff, who then can update that master file to calculate a new fee for the parcel. And so you're currently doing that as well as those things occur within the community. So we've recommended you continue to do that and update that as that information would become available.
So sort of standard best practice is to update it with each CO?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So a related question is, materials are changing, and as we were hearing about our artificial turf and things like that. But pervious pavers, say for example, a house has a central courtyard, and it was thought to be impervious, but now it has changed in its character. Would let's say a building permit be a trigger for something like that?
It's a great question. So one of the great benefits of having a standalone stormwater utility like you have in place currently is that as time were to go forward, if the council wanted to consider possibly credits for things like that, that could potentially be one element that could be included. So there are a good number of communities, and I've been involved in quite a few of these, where we've come up with credits for pervious pavement, where if a parcel owner engages in that activity, their particular fee could be reduced by a certain amount to recognize the benefit that the community receives from engaging in that activity. And so that's something that utilities, as they evolve and mature, will typically follow up with and think about possibly offering.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions, council? I have a question. And this may be directed to the manager. Under minimum operating reserves, it says that we currently have more than we need in there in our current fund. Is there flexibility, and maybe you guys looked at this, in terms of accelerating some of these projects and getting them online quicker? And maybe I ought to step back a second and let the manager, for the benefit again of people watching or here in the room who don't understand the current situation as it stands in Shores Estates, every time we have a king tide, and at Bayfront Park every time we have a king tide or a storm event, so that people know that this is not some, down the road issue. This is an immediate issue that is happening now in the Shores.
Yes, sir. Right now in Shores Estates, which again is the area from 105th to 107th west of Biscayne Boulevard, we have a situation where the existing drainage system that we have now, the water actually backs up into the subdivision, comes up through the drains and floods the streets. And depending on how severe the king tide is, you can get water sometimes that's almost a foot deep over there. We have implemented a stopgap measure where we've bought some rubber plugs, if you will. We put them inside the pipes and we inflate them, and it keeps the water out. However, if you have a king tide and you have rain, with a pipe plug, the water can't go out. So you either get flooded by, I always ask the residents, would you rather be flooded by salt water or fresh water? So they always pick fresh water, of course. So we leave the plugs in. It keeps the salt water out. But if you have a rain event, cold front coming through like today, and you have a king tide, you're going to have flooding over there. And the same thing during a king tide down at the Bayfront area, you have water actually sheet flowing over the seawall across the sidewalk, and you notice the park there. And this is a pet peeve of Ms. Birch's. The landscaping is always dead because it's constantly bathed in salt water or standing in salt water, and nothing's going to grow in that. So not only does it flood the area, but it looks bad as well. So those are two of the projects that we identified, and in the vulnerability study, like I said, the area behind Kmart was the #1 area, which is why we chose that first.
It's also,
Mr. Attorney, yep.
it's also probably important for the people to understand that in addition to these special issues that we're trying to address, the village creates and maintains and repairs and upgrades a village-wide storm water management system that the areas that don't flood because of that. And that needs to be repaired and upgraded and maintained going forward, and those costs are all built into this.
Okay. Council, other comments or questions? No, I would like to point something out, and maybe you can go back to that list again of the cities and where we sit on that list, because I think there's some important similarities between us and the other communities at the top there. You know, we're Bayfront, we're septic based, like Pinecrest. There is no real commercial or high density to help sort of shore up the tax base or shore up the assessment base. You're spreading it over largely on the backs of single family homeowners, because that's all we have, and frankly that's what this community wants to be. And we have ancient infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure here is ancient. So, I mean, honestly, that is consistent with Coral Gables, Miami Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Surfside. They're in the same boat. And that's why when we started this conversation around what is the right number for, you know, where should we be in terms of paying for the immediate needs, the critical needs of a public park, right? Bayfront Park is a public park and a community that is under siege. There were 2 or 3 homes that were destroyed in Irma, where they had to gut the inside of the house because of flooding during that storm. I mean, these are immediate threats, and council has acted because we can't wait anymore for the federal government or the state government to bail us out, because they're not coming, not anytime soon. So we have to act to protect our property and our residents. I just, you know, for a lot of you who all of a sudden maybe got the letter, are aware of the conversation leading up to this. You know, there's been a lot of thought that's gone into this process. So, Councilwoman.
One other improvement that I'd like to mention, in addition to some of the drains that have been rebuilt, the storm drains that have been rebuilt are much more effective and cleaner and showcase your property so much better. But we have a couple of areas, I'll mention the easternmost portion of 104th Street, where that area would be really helped by, perhaps by backflow preventers. We don't have any of those in the village. Those plugs that Mr. Benton described, we're trying to take the place of what could be a permanent solution, which is a backflow preventer. We would not be able to come close to doing those kinds of improvements without this stormwater fee. And I know there are very few of you here, but if you could possibly spread the word that this is a property value issue. If we let this go, and another case in Shores Estates was when a stormwater pipe actually fell apart, and that was due to the ravages of so many king tides. But if we let this go, we're not doing any of us any favors by not paying attention to what is very old infrastructure. So I just want to chime in.
Okay. Yeah. Council, any other questions, comments? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have an ordinance in front of us. Does anybody want to make a motion on it, or?
Well, I'd like
Yeah.
to move that we approve this ordinance on first reading.
Second.
Yeah. Second. We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Go ahead. You have the vote.
Well, I was gonna say, don't we have to open this up to public?
Yeah.
It is not a requirement, it's at the pleasure of the village council.
Yeah, so we've typically done it on second reading, but I think tonight this is such an important issue. Let's open it up. Yeah, if anybody would like to speak on this issue tonight, come on up. We're going to open a public hearing on this subject. Yes, yeah. Specifically, come on up. Yep.
Al Crespo. So, a couple of things. There's no question that this community and basically all of South Florida are facing a crisis. And I think it needs to be realized that this is at best, a very minor, just kind of minor stopgap measure. I mean, you can raise the seawall up, but the water's going to continue to come from underneath. If you have septic tanks, the backup is not going to come because the water's come over the seawall. The water's saturating the ground. And the whole process of how this community and all the communities here, the grading, when the Army Corps of Engineers did all this back in the day, we've lost a large chunk of that incline grade. It was like 18 inches, is now about 9 inches. So that's issue number one. So this is not going to solve anybody's problem. In fact, the long-term solution is, at the very least, we'll have to start buying houses along the bay and just tearing them down and creating a zone that says we're surrendering this back to Mother Nature. Now, I'm on a personal level, I live in a condo, and I'd like to know what the cost would be before I get a tax bill in September or October, whatever. So if this is going to be passed, I think everybody else would too, you know, it should be a way that all of us who live here get a notice now. I mean, no, for each property, for the property.
No, it is. It's individualized. Yeah, each person got the letter in the mail.
I didn't get one. I didn't get one. I can tell you I didn't get one.
All of the same with the amount is on the back.
Okay, well, then I'd like to ask for a copy of mine, and I'll check my condo association, find out if they got one. Maybe that's the way it is. But there are some serious problems that are not going to be resolved. And also the other problem is this. Those of you who own properties that want to sell them, not only is your home insurance increasing and going to increase in serious amounts in the next 4 or 5 years, but it's going to come a time very quickly, far sooner than anybody's been led to believe, when the insurance industry is no longer going to insure home sales in much of South Florida. And when that happens, game's over. You don't have to worry about your downtown district anymore. Because you're going to be wanting to do what everybody else is doing in other parts of the country is with getting out.
Yeah, come on up.
Good evening, Adam Rice, 149 Northwest 97th Street. I had a quick question about the seawall repair, I guess, or redo. When that's done, I guess the planning process of that, is that just going to be a big concrete wall that goes up, or is it going to be something, you know, that kids can look through? Like currently, you know, there's a railing, kids can walk along, and it's beautiful to see. And if you put a just big concrete seawall up there, it's kind of, you know, defeating the purpose of our beautiful Bayfront Park. I mean, is there?
So we don't typically do Q&A, but I'm going to make sure that when all public comment is done, we address what that's going to look like afterwards, because I think that's an important question. Okay?
So I just want to say that, you know, I'm glad I was here and I heard that, and obviously we have to address this because sea level rise is a huge problem in our Bayfront community. To me, And, you know, I know it's an increase. I don't think it's much, personally. It's like $5 a month, $8 a month, a cup of coffee. I think if we get it out to people in the right way and you explain it, I think the fear factor comes in when somebody gets a notice in their mail and they don't really know what's going on. And I know everybody has a right to come to these meetings, but we all know most people don't. So if there's some way that it can be explained in a, you know, if we have the social media thing going, that would be a great way for it to go. But we have to have better communication in Miami Shores because people feel like they're getting surprised with information, and that's where we have the problems. And if people really understood what's happening, they would pay it gladly to preserve property values. But I do think that like Mr. Crespo said, that this is just the beginning, and that we have to, you know, the council has to look seriously at what are we going to do long term, because this is just a little fix for a short amount of time, and it helps, but it's not the big solution. So I ask that you keep looking at this issue and engage the community in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Julio Martinez from 130 Northeast 90th Street. I agree with you just said about, I think we just had to send the notice out, and before you see that, I think April the 2nd is the one that you're going to take or approve that. Have it like a meeting on to the recreation and bring everybody. So people who are receiving that letter, I will receive it. I very panicking about increasing taxes or anything like that. I think we needed it, but we also had to explain to people what we needed. And a lot of people that bring the concern to me is worrying about, is that going to work, or are we going to have more taxes, and why we going to have those taxes or increases. So I think calling a meeting for the people would be working better and deliver the messages nicely and explanatory to everybody.
Great, thank you.
Hello, Nancy Signa, 1301 Northeast 100th Street. 2 years ago, I raised my seawall about 28 inches and backfilled it to raise up the water because it was an original seawall back from the 50s. When I saw the project on the bay at the park replace an old ugly fence from the past, I thought the project should not have been done the way it was done without raising the wall and the land in front of the park. Of course the grass is dead because the water just, you know, will kill it. But since I did my wall, there's no problem. And something they're doing in Lower Manhattan is they're extending land out into the water because obviously, you know, they're an island and they have a real problem. So that might be also another way you could look at it. So I think we should raise the land, raise the wall, not worry about, you know, kids looking through a fence. But if you raise it enough, there's not going to be dead grass there, and it'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. Comments?
Again, Victor Bruce, 370 Northeast 101st Street. You all are aware of the two houses that are going up on 101st Street. They're the first houses that are up in columns as the code requires. That's going to happen all along that edge. The house on 101st where 102nd meets will have a storm drain, and it's something completely foreign to any other house here. I wonder if that is something that could also be considered for any new construction, just like Miami Beach has ordinances within their zoning that go over the flood zone. So for example, the flood zone says X, Miami Beach tells me I have to do X plus, and that's something that's within the power of a municipality. So maybe for any kind of construction within a flood zone, either VE or, what's the other one? Jeez, totally forgot. AE and VE, actually, yes. Well, X, no. AE and VE. VE being the worst. Everything along 101st is VE. Yeah. Require a storm drain. We put a storm drain this one just because civil engineering. Sorry?
101 doesn't even have a drainage on that land.
Well, within the property. So if a homeowner who buys a property there wants to make improvements, they're most likely not going to be able to improve the existing structure. They're going to tear it down. They're going to build something new. It's going to be elevated, probably 8 feet above grade. It is going to create water runoff, which is something that we're talking about. But it maybe if the property owner is forced through municipal ordinance to install a storm drain that handles the square footage of the house as the water runs off onto its property, it could help at least the whole end. If there anything comes in, basically they handle it themselves within their property lines.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing on this ordinance. Do we have further comment, council, on this subject? I have a couple quick comments. First of all, Mr. Manager, would you explain, I mean, the idea is to raise up the level of the park, right? Not just to have a giant barrier wall where nobody can see over the side of the park.
That's correct. As Nancy said, that's what we would do is raise it up. You'd have to raise, the upland side.
And to the second point, I think that announcing a public hearing, maybe before the next meeting where people can come in and hear about this and be given an opportunity to comment on it, I think that that's a good idea. This is important. This is a tax increase. It's an assessment. And, I think that people should understand what it's for. I think most people, when you sit down and explain why we're doing it, understand it's a good idea. And I understand it's not everything, right? But, one of the things I think this council has done a good job at is we do not allow perfection to be an enemy of the good. And this is an important first step for existing problems. And, we can't just sit around and wait for somebody to rescue us. This isn't a superhero movie. It's not going to happen. So, I think that this is an important first step. Yep.
Mr. Mayor? No, I'd say that I think that one of the things that would probably help right now is the manager, can post the PDF of this and distribute, by Facebook, Twitter, front page of the website, a link to the study, which is very well put together and detailed. And I have an extra copy if anybody wants, please.
Mr. Mayor?
Let's save some paper.
It's currently on the website. But
Yeah, it's on the website.
Yeah, okay.
If you're suggesting some sort of workshop or a public meeting, I mean, you've got 2 weeks, so I think, you might as well set it tonight then.
Yeah, so you want to just set it, we come in a half an hour early or an hour early for our next meeting and just talk specifically about this issue and let people vent, ask questions. Maybe you guys can find some time to come back and give us another presentation. Yeah? Yep.
There's going to be public comment at the next meeting on these issues.
Right.
Regardless of what you do.
Right. My understanding was that they wanted a meeting.
A standalone meeting.
Standalone meeting in between this meeting and April 2nd.
Okay.
At the community center.
You know what? I think that I've heard enough from the community about confusion about this issue that maybe it makes sense to do it. So I don't know if people are available next Monday night. That would be a night that works for me. Council, is there any appetite for that? For having something at the community center next Monday night to open it up?
I'm just going to say, I think that, we can broadcast the meeting of this, but I can't imagine anybody's going to say anything that would change my vote to not support doing this because it would be ridiculous to not move forward with this at this point, honestly.
I don't think it's about the vote.
Yeah.
I think it's about informing the residents regarding increased, basically, taxes. So I think it's going to be a workshop more than anything, or just a forum.
Yep.
I'm not even sure that, our presence is, needed. I think we need the manager, I think we need the attorney, and I think we need the consultants.
Yep.
So whenever you all want to set it.
Yeah. Mr. Brown, I agree with Mr. Zelkowitz is that we're really second fiddle. It's for the residents and the people with the knowledge. I think it's a good idea, and I'd be for setting that separately, independently, and if it's next Monday, so be it.
What do you think? Can you do that next Monday, Tom?
Yes. Kelly, is your team available? That's the 25th.
I'm looking. Spring break.
6:30?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll make it work.
Okay, great. So next Monday at 6:30 at the community center. Great. We'll get one of the meeting rooms. People can come ask questions. Hopefully they can understand the issue, right? Okay. All right, so do we have a motion on the ordinance yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, do we have a second?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to call the question unless there's any other comments. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. If I can, and I don't want to do this, I'm going to ask specifically your permission, Mr. Meltz, Councilman Meltz. I'm going to have to leave the meeting early tonight, unfortunately. And I was hoping that the 2 discussion items that I had on here, we could move up before I leave.
Absolutely.
Okay, that'd be terrific. So the first item, so I'd like to move 9B up, is that?
Item 9B, discussion and possible action regarding asking the Education Advisory Board and/or Doctors Charter School Board to conduct a survey regarding Doctors Charter School similar to the one conducted for Miami Shores Elementary School. This item is sponsored by Mayor McAdam Glynn.
Okay, this is a pretty straightforward item. I think that all of us appreciated the data generated by the Miami Shores Elementary School survey. It was really helpful in terms of understanding why parents were choosing to send their kids elsewhere and what kinds of things we might be able to do to drive up participation and attendance at Shores facilities. I would like to remind everybody that, you know, we are continuing to pay for the bond, every single taxpayer in the Shores, until 2033 on Doctors Charter School. We are stakeholders. We are financial stakeholders in that facility. And I think, although I think that, let me just preface this by saying, I think the charter school does a great job. I think the faculty there is terrific. The feedback that they get from the parents that are there is phenomenal. The surveys that they get back indicate that people are generally speaking very happy with that school. But I do believe that there is value to surveying the community at large as to what they think about the school and what could be done to generate additional interest and additional attendance by students in Miami Shores. So, Councilwoman, I'm sure you have an opinion on this.
Yes, I do. And,
Okay.
I would like to talk to you personally because I really appreciate that you have this idea and that you feel that the survey that we watched was statistically accurate and also coupled with taking the opinions of our residents. People approached at Unity Day,
Yep.
people who are interested in the elementary, people who would click on it. And they did, but it was very small survey population.
Yep.
And you could definitely make an argument that the survey was not statistically significant or recognizable. So then, what do we have here? First of all, before that, at that time, we're talking about a C school. This is an A school.
Yep.
This is an A school that is proud of itself. Its board is partially appointed by us.
Yep.
We give them a job. It is outlined in the ordinance that we gave them. And out of respect for the leadership of that school, which, by the way, is very hard to come by. Good leadership is what makes your kids' school great. It's what makes DCS great.
Yep.
It's what makes an A school. It's those ingredients. And we have somebody in place who's a pretty sharp administrator.
Yes.
And so she likes some of the questions in that survey.
Yep.
I don't want to speak for her, but she feels like we should give the board and the school the ability to do a survey that would incorporate some of those questions and get the feedback of our residents. But that's gonna be during their survey time, which is in the fall of 2019, the next school year, whatever, it's 2019.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'd like to give you my promise that we would follow through with this survey and have a presentation similar to what we had here for people. But in all fairness, we're all sitting up here, and we had that executive director go to our community center in a workshop setting and put together a phenomenal PowerPoint with which you saw,
Which was terrific. Yep.
which had a lot of statistics in it that I respect.
Yep.
But I wasn't there for it. And I didn't avail myself of that opportunity.
Yep.
And so I know that maybe I know what it's like when you push something down the road and you say, oh no, that'll never get done.
Yeah.
But I give you my word.
Yeah. So I agree with you actually on 100% of those issues, because I did have a conversation with Dr. Andrews after this got on the agenda. I don't know. She called me up right away. But I think that the Doctors Charter School Board should be the one that administers the survey. It shouldn't be the advisory board. I've gone back and actually I included a copy of the ordinance that set up the educational advisory board, and it's not the appropriate venue for it. What I would hope would be that they did create some good questions around it, and they would provide the methodology by which they came up with those questions, share some of the, just basically hand it off to Doctors Charter to go forward with it. And I think it is appropriate to do it right around the start of the school year. So I actually agree with 100% of those things. And, what I would like to do is maybe, by consensus, right, pass along that guidance to the Doctors Charter School Board that we would like to see them do it that way this fall, if that's amenable to you and the rest of the board. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Or the rest of the council. Sorry. Board, council. All right. So by consensus, I think we're all aligned. I saw 5 nods. Right. Anybody disagree with that? Okay. All right. Great.
Item 9C, discussion and possible action related to Northeast 2nd Avenue corridor redevelopment issues. Possible referral to the Planning and Zoning Board. 3 items for recommendations and public comment. Number 1, review of non-site parking requirements for downtown commercial properties, businesses. Number 2, review of sign code to allow for active marquee for the the Miami Theater Center. And number 3, review of current FAR1 or FAR1 designation for downtown properties and whether it should be updated to be consistent with comprehensive plan. This item is sponsored by Mayor McAdam Glynn.
Okay, I'm going to ask Travis to join me up at the mic for this one, if possible. Mr. Kendall? Okay. So, this is Travis Kendall, our Planning and Zoning Director. I should have more formally introduced him. Sorry about that. So, there are 3 items here that I think are... and we can take these individually if the council prefers, but these are items that are sort of all incidental to conversations that we've had over the last 2 to 3.5 years regarding downtown redevelopment. So we'll start with the first one, which is that, other municipalities allow parking on adjacent sites to spur redevelopment of parcels. So basically what our current code provides is, except for retail and restaurant, right, you have to park everything on site, correct?
No, that's incorrect.
Okay.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead, please.
The current code actually requires even if it's a pre-existing building, they're excluded from parking requirements. If it is a new construction, they are required
to park on site. Restaurant
and retail to have parking on site.
Okay. So there are other municipalities, and I've had a conversation with Mr. Kendall about this, that allow some additional flexibility when it comes to that they will allow. I mean, if anybody has seen our many village-owned parking lots after 5 p.m., I mean, there are probably 1,000 empty spots here downtown. And, the idea that we're not allowing businesses that would operate in the evening, restaurants, retail, those sorts of things, the opportunity to utilize some of that parking towards the requirement seems, a little regressive. So my proposal would be to have our Planning and Zoning Board look at that with the assistant of Mr. Kendall, to look at some of the best practices from other municipalities who are looking to spur redevelopment, to see if we should create more flexibility inside of the code. And I'm going to open it up to comment and see what everybody says.
Mr. Mayor, I seem to recall when we did this study and implemented the design standards that we had talked about the use of valets as an option for properties, having parking lot agreements with other private, not just the village's parking lots, but, private parking lots that were not in use during the evening. So I had thought that we had actually implemented some of that in the code. I'm not hearing that we did, so I'd be certainly in favor of sending it back to the P&Z board and having them come up with some options, because I mean, look at Coral Gables. I mean, you go down Miracle Mile, there's no parking on the street, but every other block there's a valet. So there are options, and certainly if you want to spur redevelopment in downtown, and it seems to be starting, somewhat, it's not in full swing, that these are options that the village could also implement. So I'd be in favor of that.
Okay.
We do have valet in the ordinance. We do have it. It's
so you can meet your parking obligation for new construction by using a valet. That's what I'm talking about. Travis is shaking his head.
No, the valet the section dealing with valet has to do with the existing structures who are excluded from the parking requirements are permitted to use valet as part of the agreement to not have any on-site parking. But within the code, the specific section says that if it's new construction, they're required to have on-site parking, dealing with new development.
Right, so what I'm talking about, if it's new construction and they have, you know, the problem becomes if they don't have the valet at some point in the future, there's an agreement with a private property owner that goes away, then what do you do?
That's always the question, and I'm not, that's why I would like planning and zoning to look at it, frankly. I mean, that's why we have that set up under our charter. That mechanism is in place to come up with suggestions and recommendations.
All right, well, I'd be in favor of that.
Yeah. Councilman?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I don't see any danger of having planning and zoning. I mean, that's a smart way of approaching this. I hear confusion amongst us right now.
Yep.
And I'm going to make it even worse. I'm going to ask a question of Mr. Kendall, and I'm reviewing, because you said specifically new construction requirement. And I see the definition of new construction as being something more or less exceeding 50% of, say, improvement to the building. Here's my bottom line. The 9800 block, the post office, the 2 restaurants there, is that new construction under the code? No. So they're exempted from the new parking requirements.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so their parking requirement is what? 0. So that, no way, no how are we going to affect them opening and coming back at them and say, wait a minute, where's your parking?
No.
So when they open, they can basically...
Right, it's not within the code. If, for example, they were to, the property owner were to have leveled the building,
Right.
and then reconstructed the building, they would be required to provide on-site
Or
parking.
the 50% is if you leave a shell sort of thing? Or
No,
what's the 50%?
it's a pre-existing structure. So this really just has to do with new construction specifically, like a new structure. And that's the threshold for code improvement is 50% generally through the Florida Building Code. However, this is not. This is code specific for new construction.
Okay.
Okay. Council, any other comments on this item? No? Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion that we send this item down to planning and zoning, for consideration and recommendation.
Yeah, I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The next one is one that we've talked about tonight, or we've heard a little bit in the public comments. Spoken with Miami Theater Center, and the issue is, and I mean, I've engaged with the theater center. I care about their programming. I go over there, but I don't check their website all the time. And the best method still is the old-fashioned method for knowing what's happening, and that's an active marquee. The challenge is, and I've spoken to our good village attorney about this, and spoken to Mr. Kendall about it, that you don't want a proliferation of active signage throughout the village, right? So you don't want this to be
Throughout the downtown.
well, throughout the downtown. You don't want to be flashing, signage everywhere, right? And signage law is a very tricky thing. I know the attorney's looking at me very carefully.
That may be the understatement of the.
Yeah. But I would like to figure out if there is a solution to this, and I'd like the attorney to look at this, and I'd like our planning and zoning director to look at this, and I'd like planning and zoning to look at this to figure out if there is a way that we can carve this out. Maybe it's nonprofits operating in a B1 district, that can have these active signage. I don't know if that would be permitted. I don't know if that's too narrowly tailored, but,
Let me back up.
Yeah.
The old-fashioned method is you have a marquee
Yeah.
with signage on it. I'm not aware of anything that prevents that. We do have a village-wide ban. I don't have the language in front of me, but I think it's 529H maybe, on essentially television signs. And for a lot of reasons, including it's a pretty busy street out there. You don't want people watching TV while they're driving by. It's going to be very tricky you're a lawyer. You can't develop you can't intentionally legislate one rule for one property Yeah. And different rules for everybody else.
Right.
Similarly situated people need to be treated the same.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's impossible, what you're doing, but the two things I would say are, you want to proceed with caution, and you don't want to do anything that will invite an attack upon our sign code, because there, in numerous other jurisdictions, and fortunately we're, at least so far, we haven't attracted the attention of the type of people who do this for a living. People come out and they attack sign codes in municipalities trying to get it stricken down so that they can then put up billboards.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's something that can be looked at. I can't promise that we can find a way to allow what I think you're referring to as active marquee up there.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
I remember speaking with Giselle, like probably 4 years ago about this, and she asked me if we can do this or not. And I remember doing some research on it. For some reason or another, and maybe I'm completely off base, I thought that the county controlled in this particular situation when it came to the active signs, and that there is a ban or a prohibition on them unless you have 10 acres of property. And
You know what? That's something I haven't looked at, but you may be right. I'd have to take a look at that.
And I remember having a discussion because yes, we do want to have something there. A marquee is not prohibited, but you know the scrolling
right
signs, and I know the village has one on obviously 96th Street. But I remember we went and we looked at this at some point.
Our
For
code
some
talks
reason,
about intermittent illumination.
I'm thinking that the county seemed to have some sort of preemption on signs like this.
They might. I'd have to take a
So
look at
maybe
how
you all
far
want
it
to take a
goes.
look at that. I kind of remembered. I mean, do you remember having that conversation a long time ago?
So, Mr. Mayor,
Anyway.
I just
Councilwoman,
want,
yep.
I was just trying to sweep away some of the cobwebs of my memory about the marquee that is existing at the Five Corners. And when that went in, there were similar issues. But when we wanted to push forward with it, since there were no buildings around it, I think that was one of the reasons that we were, and then there was some sort of a rule. Then we played around with the idea, do you remember this, that we were trying, that Movies was trying to show movies, and we were talking about those kinds of, the kind of signage that they wanted could only be done if you had a certain number of seats for people to participate in the movie. And I thought.
I don't know that that was a signage issue. At the time, we had certain restrictions on
showing movies.
Yeah, movie theaters. In
But
the
I
district.
thought but I thought it played into the signage too, and
Took care of that.
I recall where the council actually had the ability to dictate what movies could and couldn't be shown. Was that it?
No, not to my recollection, but we did have you know, they talk about how an ounce of history is worth a pound of logic. For historical purposes, there was in the code a prohibition in the district on movie theaters.
On showing movies, right.
Right. And the concern was you had a very nice theater that was having theater presentations. We didn't want to see what hardly ever exists anymore, which is, you know, the dirty pictures.
it does seem that there should be a solution to this.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that there is no solution here, and maybe there is no solution. Maybe it's just beyond my imagination.
I don't think the issue is whether or not there's a solution. The issue before you tonight is whether or not we should look at it.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I mean, I'm of the opinion we should look at it. I don't know what the rest of.
I think you should look at it again. I would definitely take a look at the county code.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to make a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Yeah.
I actually thought I was making the motion before for all three, so.
Oh, perfect.
I support all,
Okay.
sending all three to planning and
Great.
zoning.
All right, yeah, and so do we have all in favor of moving that one along to planning and zoning and having the attorney look at it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Great.
Aye.
Aye. All right, last one, and then I really do have to run, or I'm gonna miss this plane. We talked during the conversation, about the comprehensive plan, about, the FAR 3 versus FAR 1, and the fact that we would have to reconcile that, in the code, because it was in the comprehensive plan, or else we were gonna have to strip it out. We decided to go forward with it. Now comes the back half, which is reconciling it. So I wanted to have Mr. Kendall talk about a couple of options, and ask planning and zoning to look at those options.
Okay. Obviously, the council on second reading approved the comprehensive plan and created a specific restricted commercial district in the downtown for new construction, allowing for a 3.0 FAR. However, in the existing or current code, there is no actual restricted commercial designation on any of the future land use maps. So as a result of that, in order to facilitate this type of redevelopment, there is no current zoning district zone restricted commercial. So in order to actually achieve what the master plan or vision set forth, then you would actually need to do a future land use map amendment or small scale comprehensive change to the future land use map and transmit it to the state once the comprehensive plan is actually approved by, or after it's, we get the final approval back from the state. Even though in theory you've already approved that, but my recommendation would be to wait until we get the final okay from them before we move forward with this future land use map change as a result of that. But that's what would need to occur in order to facilitate it, because what you don't want to have happen is you don't want to change the existing B1 code to allow for 3.0, because then we'd have to do a comp plan amendment change, which we could, but it's probably easier to do the future land use, the Flume amendment as they abbreviate it, in order to facilitate that.
Great.
So,
Council, any questions? So my motion would be.
To add a 3A back?
Yeah, well, my motion would be that on this one, when we get the comp plan back, that it goes to planning and zoning to evaluate the options that Mr. Kendall described. Second?
Yeah, I would second that.
Okay. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Have a great night.
Drive safe.
Thanks.
All right,
Actually,
let's-
one more thing on the record. I have to tell you, I think that the idea for solar on village-owned buildings is a terrific idea, and I commend Councilman Melch for bringing it forward.
All right, let's step it up. I'm gonna have to go soon, too.
So, in light of that, so, Madam Clerk, do we want to back up to 7B?
It's the pleasure of the village council. Go back to 7.
I think
Yes.
I think we should go back to 7B to the ordinance.
An ordinance of the Miami Shores Village Council amending Appendix A, Article 5, Establishment of Regulations, Division 17, Section 536, Design Standards, Subsection 7, allowing the use of synthetic turf in the rear yard, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. This item was sponsored by Councilman Jonathan Melt. Staff on this item is the Planning and Zoning Director.
I'll move the item on first reading, the ordinance.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Council? Any questions, discussion, or questions for the Planning and Zoning Director?
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Councilman?
And I thank you all for your moving it. The one thing I do want to discuss and add, I was contacted, I don't know if you all have been contacted by residents who were very, very happy about council taking this possibly up tonight, but they felt something specific important was left out. This is talking about the rear backyard. However, many residents have in their driveways large pavers which cause a problem for what you put in between. I'm sure you all have seen it. There's pictures if you need to. So what they've done is to put the same, or want to put the same material in between the pavers. So it's about a 1-inch strip, and they felt that that should be part of this. So procedurally, and we can discuss, what I would ask is for that to be an amendment, to be incorporated. And if I don't know if you all need it to go back to P&Z, but I hope I'm articulating what the residents are asking me to do.
I mean, I would amend, my motion to include that in the ordinance for second reading.
Very good.
I mean, we have Travis here. Do you think that's something that P&Z needs to look at again, or is that something we can just have you and the attorney work on and draft and include in the ordinance on second reading?
If I may, I'll bring this up. through the chair. The Planning and Zoning Board did specifically have the discussion about artificial turf being placed in the front yard. They were, I don't know if I would use the word adamantly opposed to it.
Strongly?
Strongly opposed to any artificial turf that can be seen from the public right-of-way. And it was something that was discussed at length in that meeting, and this is the recommendation that they're making. So if it were sent back, I'm fairly confident that their response would be the same ordinance that's in front of you.
And that position was including the small, like, let's say, 2-inch gap in between large pavers in the front yard. So I don't see,
Specifically, they consider
I don't
that.
see any reason to send it back to planning and zoning.
I agree, but if I could just add it, some of the things that was talked about with the 2-inch or whatever dimension strips in the front was the adherence of a small strip, versus the bigger stuff in the backyard, how it's installed and will it stay adhered. Oil, lack of a better word, drippage, when you put cars on top of it, and of course the front yard visual issues. That's some of the things that they talked about, but it's not something that they ignored. They discussed it, and this was their view.
Noted.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Councilwoman?
I was at that meeting. I heard that discussion, so I know when you send it back, I know they had very strong opinions. I have since seen one of these AstroTurf or artificial turf strips put in, and actually I've seen the construction. I walked by it. I thought to myself, I thought that was illegal, but they did it. and so I saw the process, and now I realize that they're trying to do something effective. People are in love with these paver strips. These concrete strips are going in everywhere, and a year, 10 years down the line, we want them to be able to maintain what they've done. The ones with the stones, the stones in between, a lot of times I see the stones sink. Mr. Meltz and I have been going door to door, so we've seen a lot of these things firsthand. And we understand that that P&Z had their opinion, but I really feel that if we pass this with the artificial turf in front yards and we don't allow for that, these people are going to be crazy.
Mr. Vice Mayor? And having sat on the Planning and Zoning Board, I sometimes understand their sort of approach to items like this, and including things in the past like the 5-foot versus the 6-foot fences as well. So to me, this is something more of what the residents are asking for versus what the Planning and Zoning Board might think is the best thing. A question for Travis. Is there, what is it called, Miami-Dade County product approval for stuff like this?
Well, within the ordinance, as you can see, there are significant requirements which have been certainly added. The requirements which were generated or that generated from the Planning and Zoning Board are actually in excess of what would be required by approval of Miami-Dade County. They exceed the requirements as far as drainage and things along those lines. And there is no specific standard for Miami-Dade County for artificial turf.
All right. Well, my motion as amended still stands. I'm waiting for a second.
I'll second.
And so one last question here for the, for Planning and Zoning Director. What are we specifying as the maximum size that would be, you know what I'm saying? If we're saying we can do these strips, right? What is the...
There is none currently. The ordinance as proposed says that you are permitted to have artificial turf in the rear yard only for 30%, not to exceed 600 square feet total.
So what I had asked is for staff to come back with a recommendation based upon what might be approved in other jurisdictions. For the front, for the space in between the pavers.
So that direction is clear as far as, okay. All right, any further discussion?
The direction's clear.
Okay. Any further discussion? No? So we call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
The amendment?
I apologize. On the amended ordinance.
Well, hang on.
So we need
You don't have an amended ordinance yet. What
We
you
don't
is
have.
two things that need to be considered tonight. First, there's a motion requesting staff to present for the agenda with the second reading, a alternative version with the guidance announced. I think we should vote on that first, and then pass what you have on first reading, and then you can make the decision on
Okay.
what we produce when you get to second reading.
So we have a motion and a second on
Both.
on both.
Okay, you could do that.
Okay, so
Pass it on first reading with the request for the alternative along the lines of the guidance given.
My motion is exactly what the
Like
the
he said.
attorney is suggesting.
Right.
anybody have a second?
She seconded that.
Second that. Okay, so let's call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 8A, resolution of the Village Council of Miami Shores, Village, Florida, authorizing the village manager or his designee to submit a grant application to the Florida Inland Navigation District Waterways Assistance Program for Bayfront Park Improvement Project Phase 1, providing for certifications and providing for an effective date. Staff on this item is the village manager.
Mr. Manager?
Mr. Vice Mayor, this dovetails into our discussion earlier with the stormwater utility. The time is opening up so that we can apply for the FIND grant, and we need to do some design work there in order to apply for the actual construction dollars. And as I said in my memo, our grant writer has indicated that FIND, and we have talked to them. I believe he came here and made a presentation when Ms. Birch was mayor, but they will not approve the Phase 1 unless they're interested in actually giving you the construction dollars in Phase 2. So if we get over this Phase 1 hurdle, then we're guaranteed just about it. I never want to say guaranteed, but we have a very good opportunity to get the match that we need for the new seawall down at the Bayfront Park. But we need to get in right now and do this under Phase 1.
I'll move the resolution.
Second.
Any further discussion, questions for the manager? No? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Item 8B, a resolution of the Village Council of Miami Shores Village, Florida, authorizing and directing the village manager to promulgate and maintain an integrated pest management IPM policy for pest control programs to eliminate or reduce pesticide applications on village property to the maximum extent feasible. This item was sponsored by Councilwoman Alice Birch. Staff on this item is the village manager.
All right, Councilwoman?
So one thing that has occurred in the interim from when the policy was distributed to us is that those individuals who've been deeply interested in having integrated pest management had an attorney look at the language and make with some questions and suggestions, which I would request that our attorney look at.
Haven't seen it.
I know. It just came late. So that's one thing. But basically, I asked for this policy. I think the staff did a phenomenal job putting together a really comprehensive policy. This isn't something that is just going to be put up on a nail in a garden shop at Public Works. This is something that has some analysis behind it and some chain of command that will help the people that are actually carrying it out. And so I want to thank the staff and Mr. Benton for working on this. And I know that he looked at what several cities are doing. I know that Mr. Davis has some nervousness about being able to preserve what we have with a policy like this. But I also know that there's, we have the best people in place to make it work the best. That's what I feel about our Public Works Department and about our management. That they know that we're serious about trying to cut down on poisons and that this policy will help them to carry it out. So I would urge you to pass the resolution. I'd like to.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry, you weren't finished.
Yes, I would like the resolution to pass. Go ahead.
Okay.
Councilman?
So this is certainly something I'm in favor of, and I think it's a great initiative, and the policy is fantastic. But Councilman, I heard you say earlier that there were some comments to the resolution that were presented by council for some other folks. Are you asking that those comments be incorporated? Are you asking our attorney to review those, or you want to defer this so he can look at them and you bring it back at the next meeting? If those are important to you, or do you just want us to pass the resolution as presented? And I'm deferring to you because you brought this forward.
Well, that's a difficult question because I don't know if some of these change. One of the items that came up in the other attorney's review were definitions, and it would be helpful to have definitions for, since we're talking about chemicals and we're talking about something new that we haven't done before. It would be helpful to have definitions. So I would like the attorney to review that based on that. Does anyone else have comments?
If I may.
Mr. Attorney?
And I'm sort of hearing this for the first time, but if I understand it correctly, the comments are not on the resolution. They're on the policy that staff has developed. Is that right? All right.
Correct.
The resolution directs staff to develop and implement a policy. So if you pass the resolution now and there are issues with the policy, one of the reasons we did it this way is staff can always change the policy.
I'll move the resolution as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. All right, if there's no more discussion, I'd like to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Attorney.
Green Corridor PACE District Activities and Outcomes. This item is sponsored by Vice Mayor Sean Brady.
Okay, so due to the fact that I saw the extent of this agenda after submitting this, we're going to defer this to a later meeting after the next council is seated, so they can bring them up to speed on this. Just all I would say about it, I know you all have in your agenda packet and end of the public. This is available online. The program has had a study done, and the study is under peer review right now, but it appears to be there's a lot of really good outcomes of this program. So we can go ahead and move to the next item.
$9D.
9D.
Discussion and possible action on installation of solar energy projects on village-owned buildings and land, sponsored by Councilman Jonathan Meltz.
Mr. Vice Mayor, may I?
Councilman?
Thank you. I mean, as it's come up a bunch of times, this is real simply, I'm asking us to direct staff to do a report for, based on the feasibility of installing solar energy projects on any and all village-owned buildings and vacant land. Those of you who have read the short memo I put together, this is something that is just, to me, it was remarkable. We haven't done it, or other communities down here in the sun haven't done it. The last thing I said, it's even being done in the great state of Maine. And I would go out on a limb and say we're better suited for it than Maine. But, you know, all these buildings, and I did talk to the manager how there's, you know, behind the scenes with municipalities, there's the movement for, was it 100 cities or to participate?
100 resilient cities.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Birch. Right, but whatever it is that, yeah, I don't think there's any damage. Of course, there's going to be a cost, there's going to be something, but let's get our professional staff members getting moved forward on this and then bring it back and we can have an intelligent discussion.
Councilman, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the challenge in the past has probably been just that there's a significant, you know, capital investment, but it's absolutely something that I would be very much in favor of. So it's what we're really asking for is for the staff to look at opportunities. I'm sorry.
Right, and you're very well versed in it, considering your involvement with solar. But for most of us, I'm trying to understand what power it can generate, what sites would be good, the cost. I know even if you generate power, you sell it back to FPL, just all possibilities. And if they can even sprinkle in a possibility of some grants and some government funding, that'd be wonderful too.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Councilman?
Mr. Attorney, do we need a motion or just a consensus on this?
Consensus would work.
We have a
My
consensus?
understanding is it's a request for study, may be too strong a word, but for us to bring information back to the council.
And I think specifically around opportunities to deploy
Right.
solar power systems on village-owned property.
I get that, thank you.
Okay. So by consensus?
Sure.
All right.
Certainly.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Item 9E, discussion and possible action
Welcome.
on establishing a full-time social media and communications coordinator position. This item is sponsored by Councilman Jonathan Meltz.
Mr. Vice Mayor, may I again? Again, this is something that's continuously coming up in every forum we're at, as we're knocking on doors, as we just did tonight in terms of having to schedule something for next Monday so we can educate and inform our residents of things going on. Incredible programming going on here in the Shores. Our staff does an incredible job, everything from recreation to the library to the concerts, everything. But there's a problem getting the information out. And I don't fully understand all the roles that everybody has within Village Hall and the rest of our departments. I do know specifically Lisa Keeley, who's doing it now, is doing an incredible job, and she's doing actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, multiple jobs. So I'm not saying who should do this. I just think we need to support 100% the creation of the position, whether it be Lisa. That's not. I have nothing to do with that. I just think that if she is doing 2, 3 other jobs or other responsibilities, whomever who gets selected for this should be 100% focused on getting the word out to our residents.
You want a dedicated person.
So
That's it. It's a full-time social media communications coordinator position. Dedicated.
So Councilman, so the idea would be to have one person to help drive alignment and deliver a consistent message across all methods of communication, website, social media, print, and to coordinate the activities of all the different departments that need to get their message out about their programming, what they're doing.
Correct.
So are we asking staff to create a job description, salary range, and look for a person, or
I think
are you looking to?
Mr. Manager?
No, if I may, we have it already. We have the job description, the salary range, we have a position budgeted. And when we hired this new clerk configuration, I needed somebody immediately in my office. Lisa fit the bill, so we moved Lisa out of her full-time position as being our social media coordinator and marketing person into my office. I hear you loud and clear. We will make the necessary adjustments and we'll get somebody back in there.
I appreciate that, and I'm somewhat apologizing for bringing it up in this forum. I just want the residents to know that us as a council is not ignoring what they've been saying loud and clear. And we understand their communication, so I appreciate it, and I mean no offense to anybody by bringing it up this way, but now it's part of the record, and I believe we're all in consensus on it, and it will get done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Announcements. Need a ride to downtown Miami Shores? Miami Shores Village is offering free shuttle service from the community center to Brightline Station downtown and Metro Mover 5th Street Station. Call the community center for more information at 305-758-8103. Join the Village Council, the Library Board, and staff as we celebrate Brockway Memorial Library's groundbreaking ceremony for the Children's Wing expansion on Friday, March 22nd, 2019 at 4 p.m. The village election is scheduled for Tuesday, April 9th. Please contact the village clerk at 305-762-4870 for information. The deadline to request a vote by mail ballot is April 3rd, 2019. The next meeting of the Village Council will be held at Village Hall on Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019, beginning at 6:30 p.m. And the Miami Shores Community Shred Day and Prescription Drug Takeback will be held on Saturday, April 27th from 9 a.m. to noon at the Miami Shores Presbyterian Church parking lot located at 602 Northeast 96th Street. And please remember to visit the village website for more information on village events departments and to sign up to receive agenda notifications. Item 11, Village Council comments.
All right, Council, any comments?
Been talking so much the last few weeks, I don't have anything else to say tonight.
I don't either.
I would just like to thank everybody who came out tonight, because we did have a packed house earlier. I mean, I think everything that was on the agenda tonight was very important for the future of Miami Shores, and sustaining Miami Shores as the Village Beautiful. I'd also like to thank the Vice Mayor for taking over after the mayor left and moving these items with alacrity and aplomb so we could all get out of here before 9 o'clock. So, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. I'll be super fast in light of that. I just wanted to really thank the Recreation Department for putting together the Daddy-Daughter Dance. That was this last Friday. It was a great event. It was absolutely wonderful. I also wanted to say, I know this is something Councilman Meltz has said many times. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us about any of these issues, beforehand. It's a very effective way of being heard. And the last thing I just wanted to say is I know that the sea level rise, climate change thing can seem very daunting, but it's very important to the future of the community that we just chip away at it. So I'm glad that we did some things on that tonight. So thank you, Council. Thank you. All right, good night. Meeting is adjourned.